Welcome to the OBR streaming network. This is The React. My name is Brad Ward. I am one of your hosts. Excuse me, something in my throat there. Fellow host next to me, the always spectacular Pete Smith. Follow him on X at _Pete Smith _. What is happening tonight, Pete?
Doing all right. The Browns are tempting fate once again by only rolling with two kickers. I'm not sure it's a great idea, but we'll see what happens.
Not only that, but tormenting the poor man, yo-yoing him on and off the roster.
Yeah. Shout out Lucas Haversack. Hopefully he catches on with the Commanders.
Yeah, that would be good. What's up to the chat? Everybody rolling in. We appreciate your participation. The YouTube page is up and running. Make sure you hit subscribe, hit like. It's do your duty and hit those buttons down there. Help us out a little bit. If you're watching on X, hop on over to YouTube and hit subscribe to the revamped YouTube channel, which we are up and running on. All 4 nights a week here, soon to be 4 nights a week here on the OBR streaming network. All right, let's get to the React. Pete, what we got? Second week of OTAs going on right now in Berea. Is today I think today is a Watson throwing day, if I'm not
should
off
be
base there. Yeah, should be. They played golf yesterday. Worked out in the morning, played golf in the afternoon. Some funny images coming away from that of them playing golf at, was it Westfield Country Club?
That I'm not sure. All I know is the Browns are toying with some emotions by showing Nick Chubb standing there looking healthy, but not actually doing anything other than laughing.
Laughing, yes, laughing at Jameis Winston miss a putt, I believe.
Which clearly means ready for week 1.
Yeah,
full speed ahead.
Yep, absolutely. All right, we've got a couple videos for you here tonight. Should be a good show. First thing we want to dive into, though, is go back to last Thursday a little bit. And last Thursday was, the first day, a big day out in Berea, first day that the media was available to watch practice, and Deshaun was throwing the football. So, hot topics. But one of the interviews that stood out the most, I think, Pete, was Ken Dorsey talking about the new offense. So we're going to dive into that here to start the show. We've got some fun stuff planned for you tonight, so stick around. Like I said, hit that subscription button, hit that like button, hit notifications so you know every time we go live. Let's dive into it now with offensive coordinator for your Cleveland Browns, Ken Dorsey, talking to the press on Thursday.
Where's Deshaun kind of relative in his rehab to where you would hope he would be if he wasn't going through a rehab?
No, yeah, I think rehab versus non-rehab wise, obviously the reps. He's not getting the live reps out there on some of those 7-on-7 periods and things like that we're doing. But I think Kevin does a great job the way he structures practice in the off-season program, one, with the rules and doing what we're allowed, but then two, that really allows Deshaun now to get some reps too, from not just strictly standing back behind a mental space. So I think it's a really good combination right now of him getting mental reps, him getting some of the live reps, quote unquote live reps that he can't get in a more of a jog through tempo, and then obviously the routes and the throwing when he can't get in it on his throwing days.
Now that you're out here on the grass, even though what you just said, how will your offense can get the most out of Deshaun Watson?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a constant evaluation to make sure we're doing the right things. That's part of developing an offense and coaching, to making sure we're maximizing our personnel as much as possible. And of course, that starts with Deshaun. So we're constantly going to be evaluating that, making sure we're doing the right things, especially as he gets out there and those reps continue to grow from a full speed standpoint.
Ken, when you see him throw the ball, like today was the first time we saw him live, and it looked good, but have you seen him, I guess, really push it with the arm?
Yeah, I think each day, it just keeps going, and so I think that's part of this process, and it is a process. We went through a similar thing in Carolina with Cam coming off of shoulder surgery, where we had to make sure we were monitoring distance of throws. Couldn't go past a certain yardage. How many throws he's making at practice. All those things were basically throughout the entire year. So I think where he's at right now is kind of in that process right now. And as he gets more and more comfortable, and part of that's just the mental side of things too, that, I could start really opening it up more and more because of the confidence in it, So I think there's a lot of that involved with it as well. But
all right, I got a question. No zip gate or anything like that, but you saw him throw. What'd you think?
It was all right. Step in the process. I mean, it certainly beats the alternative. I don't get caught up in, I don't need him to get on the radar gun and prove it, or
for sure
try to throw it 60 yards. And the fact that they are essentially having him rep in situations that are predictable. That's one of the reasons he's not doing 7-on-7 at this point, is because they don't want to have him sort of surprise himself with what he's trying to do at this point, which is fine. I don't, if I didn't know he was coming back from shoulder surgery, I wouldn't know that he was, that there was something different about him, other than the fact that it doesn't look like he's going full speed based on the clips or whatever we've seen. I mean, that's what we want. I mean, I think I talked about it last week where, what we saw last year, where he looks like a full-on relief pitcher at times, where looks like he's stepping way off the mound and getting way into his body and all this other stuff. I think overcompensating for what he was dealing with, because he legitimately had, up to that point, a pitching injury. You're seeing a much shorter motion, a much more comfortable motion. It doesn't look like he's fighting it at all. These are all things I take as good news, but what am I supposed to be able to say other than, hey, he looks pretty good on air? I mean, I think if air lines up against the Browns, air is in trouble. Yeah. But it's difficult to truly assess, other than it feels good in terms of ball location and timing, some of those other things, until there's a defense on the field and until he's able to just play. And we're not talking about thinking about what he's doing, or he's just reacting and just playing football. And that's not going to happen until training camp, most likely. And that's fine. I'm happy that he's repping, because honestly, I wasn't sure that he would be at this point.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll see a little bit more at mini camp, but he's on schedule, which is all I can ask for.
Yeah. Right. I mean, you're not worried about velocity or anything like that. But, I mean, he's standing upright, he's spinning it. It looks, his motion looks like the way he threw it when he was healthy before. So, I mean, I would say that's probably a good thing, right? You just want him out there throwing it. And the fact that he's been able to let it go 30, 40 yards a couple times that we've seen on clips, I think that's pretty good, because like we talked about, for me, it was just kind of hey, as long as he's ready by training camp, that's cool, right? And so the fact that he's out there now is kind of a plus. I would look at it.
It's good for everybody's mental space in terms of he's feeling good, it's going in the right direction, teammates feel good, they feel like he's going in the right direction, and that's what it's all about at this point.
All right. Let's listen to Ken some more here.
You see him continue each day ramping it up a little bit more and more. He threw the ball down the sideline, a vertical throw today, and that's one I hadn't seen from him a lot, because we haven't pushed him to do it. So that was good to see. So I think the more he grows and feels comfortable with it, the more you'll start seeing those things get ramped up more and more.
Ken, does it make your evaluation and putting the system in a little bit more challenging, knowing he's not at 100% and it's kind of a day-by-day situation?
I think that's a good question. I think what we're trying to do right now is, because of his situation, obviously, he's trying to get all the reps he possibly can from a mental standpoint, but we still want to install the offense, and we still want to, get everybody else, involved up to speed. So that puts a lot on us as coaches and in in the quarterback room to make sure we're maximizing every learning tool possible. From the different camera angles to on the practice field, making sure we're talking, live as plays are going on and all that stuff. So, you don't want to limit, what you're installing just based off of, his availability, because, there's things that those other guys need to make sure they're getting reps on too.
Ken, the end product of your offense, how much would you estimate you'll be in shotgun versus under center?
Again, I think it's a conglomerate effort, and between Kevin, myself, the whole coaching staff, there's a lot of input on those types of things, not only from the pass game, but obviously the run game as well. So to put a number on that, I think the season is so fluid, and a lot of times you don't really know because of the way this, the league has evolved in terms of what you can and can't do in training camp and OTAs and things like that. A lot of times those things are evolving until week 3 or 4 of the season, and it's not truly like set in stone until you get a really good feel in true live game action. So to answer your question long about, I think it's still an evolving process to determine exactly where we want to be from a gun versus under ratio.
Ken, what have you seen from Jameis as he's taken those live reps just in practice last 2 weeks?
Yeah, I think James done a great job, and it's really encouraging. I think the most encouraging thing is all right, if we make a mistake and we go in the room and correct it, you see that being corrected the next day, on whether it's similar concepts, the same concept, whatever it is. So as a veteran guy who's played a lot of football and seen a lot of things, it's not like he's not open to the coaching and not open to the evolution of his game, and kind of how maybe we do things a little different than what he's used to. So he's done a great job from a leadership standpoint, from a execution standpoint, continuing to grow, and then taking what we're talking in there onto the grass.
Ken, how much does your personal experience as being an NFL quarterback and, of course, college, help you in your job as offensive?
I think it's a good question. I like to think it does help because when you're watching film and you're watching it from the side view and the back view and that wide angle, things look so different than from that perspective from under center. And it's like, why, just throw that. Well, it's like, from that view, it doesn't look the same all the time as that wide angle view. And when you can rewind it a few times and everything. So I think there's a understanding of some things are realistic, some things aren't from a what you ask those guys to do standpoint sometimes. And then just the understanding of, comfort level of that position is so important. They got to feel comfortable and confident in what they're doing because they're the ones pulling the trigger at the end of the day. So we got to make sure we're getting those guys to that point where they feel 100% ready to go and rip it and just able to react and not think about things.
Why do you like using?
That's interesting. I wonder, Pete, is what the correlation is like of quarterbacks. I know there's a number of them in the league, offensive coordinators and their success rate, right? I'm trying to think of any that have failed terribly.
Oh, it definitely happens, but what's interesting is it's usually backup quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Now some of that is because typically starters don't want to then go and be a coach for various reasons. But Gary Kubiak and guys along those lines have had a lot of success in that realm. But I do think there's value in his perspective because you can draw stuff up on a whiteboard and it makes a whole lot of sense. But whether it's timing or the type of throw you're asking a quarterback to make or some of those things like that, Dorsey, even though he obviously played a completely different style of quarterback than Deshaun Watson, does have a sense of what's realistic and some of those things in the same way that when you get these former offensive linemen who know how to coach the line, have a sense of what can you reasonably ask these guys to do in order to get this job done. You can talk yourself into, of course he can go out there and get, this guy off the edge or whatever, but there has to be somebody who's able to say, look, or I should say there's value in somebody being able to say, look, I've tried to do it. It's just not reasonable. So I do think, there's certainly any number of coordinators who have been successful without that, but experience and being able to put yourself in that situation and those things has value. The stuff that's funny to me is like the people who are asking questions that like no one can possibly know, like talking about under center and gun. And I know there's like this thing about, well, let's get to Deshaun Watson and gun endlessly because that's where he's most comfortable. And for the most part, I would say, yeah, you should probably operate under the gun, out of the gun for the most part. However, I would want the Browns to keep sort of putting him in some uncomfortable situations to just build his game, but also to see if he finds things he really likes doing like that. Just because he hasn't done a whole lot under center doesn't mean he can't. And it doesn't mean there won't be things he likes from that look. Likewise, you do want to tailor to his strengths and find his comfort zone. And ultimately, if you challenge him on these things and you get into the training camp and you're trying to have him operate under center, he's basically like, this just doesn't work for me. Okay, fine. But like, at least you've sort of explored it from that standpoint, because there are some advantages in terms of that potential with the play action game, because Watson's never been a guy who's done a whole lot of turning his back to the defense. And that is a thing there are a lot of quarterbacks want no part of. Joe Flacco obviously excelled in that area where he was more than comfortable doing that. Jacoby Brissett excelled in that area where he was comfortable doing that. But I would want my offense to expose Watson to those things, because just because he hasn't done it doesn't mean he can't or won't enjoy it. He may just not have done it. So trying to put hammer out what the offense is going to look like, who knows? At this point, I would assume he's going to be in the gun quite a bit just because that's where he's at comfort wise. And the Browns want to put him in as many good situations as possible. But look, there's going to be opportunities for him to be under center where it has an advantage. Obviously, one of those is not sneaking because he sucks at it, as he freely admits. But just in terms of run angles and some of the things you can do out of there, I do think there's some value to at least exploring it, giving him different angles and ways to look at it that I think are worthwhile.
I gotta think that as far as the sneaking thing goes, just real quickly, that they find something similar to what they started to do last year with Harrison Bryant, like on 4th and 1s or 3rd and 1s or whatever. You probably want to remove him from those situations if possible, right?
Especially because he isn't comfortable. Like he freely admits, I'm not good at this and I don't like doing it. So why would you ask him to do it in that scenario? And look, you've got Jameis Winston. He's a big boy. You've got the possibility of putting bigger backs on the backfield. You've got like a quick defensive tackle in Mike Hall that could do it. You've got offensive linemen if you want to go that route again. Certainly, I think Hall is a better option. And we'll see if they want to do anything else tight end wise, if they want to bring in somebody else who's sort of more equipped in that realm. But look, the Browns are going to find ways to give themselves an advantage. The Browns messed around with it with DTR and had some success where he was an extra player on the field and converted with that. Whether they find a Harrison Bryant type to do that, I suspect they will find somebody who can simulate some of those benefits that finds them in a comfort zone. So on 4th and short, they can make sure they get the first down.
So this is interesting. Before we get back into this, you mentioned DTR, so I wanted to ask you about it. He's still out with his hip, right? So not available yet. And you've got Tyler Huntley there. And I mean, ideally they want probably to keep DTR as the 3rd quarterback on the roster and move Huntley to the practice squad. But as soon as teams start to have injuries, don't you think that like Huntley would be the first guy you go to, a guy with experience starting experience? I mean, he made a Pro Bowl, not sort of, but he actually made it, but whether he deserved it or not. But I mean, he seems like a guy that would get ripped off the practice squad pretty quickly once injuries start to take place during the season.
Yeah, and look, I mean that's life in the NFL. You may run into a situation where he gets scooped up, and ultimately, the fact that he's on the practice squad allows him that. And I think part of the deal with the Browns bringing Tyler Huntley is they they want him to be better for the experience, and being better for the experience is likely ending up on an active roster elsewhere. Now, the other side of that is, say somebody goes down in camp and the Browns are sitting there with this fourth quarterback and somebody wants to make a trade, then, to get somebody a little bit more proven. I mean, I still look at Baltimore right now, and not that they would be trading with the Browns, but like, what is that? What is their situation? My understanding is they put Malik Cunningham back at receiver. So
yeah,
what happens if Lamar Jackson is just like, what if he's sick that day? Are you just rolling with the rookie? I mean, so we'll see. I mean, I think DTR is getting close to being able to start working again. I still think the world of his ability. I think he showed a lot last year after he, the first Ravens game was awful.
Yeah.
It wasn't a good situation for him. I don't blame the Browns for it. They were going in with the thought that Watson was going to be the guy, and you game plan for that. Then he got through the Steelers game, won with a game-winning drive, and I thought he played well against the Broncos, and I thought the Browns were going to take control of that game until he got hurt. Then he obviously did some good stuff on fourth down. With him, I think just getting stronger will help, but just the more experience he gets and the more comfort he has. Like, I can't wait. I'm that sick person who wishes the NFL still had 4 preseason games, not because I want my starters in there, but I want to see these guys play and then never play again, which was the plan last year, which is going great. DTR crushes it. People are like, no, I wouldn't take a second-round pick for DTR, and then he has to go in, and everybody's like, oh, now he sucks. So I think he's going to be a good player. Is he going to be good enough to start? I don't know, but I do think he's going to be able to put himself in a position to be the long-term backup, so the Browns stop having to do this year-by-year thing, and they just have a quarterback they feel really good about.
You think he'll be back, though, in time? Like in the chat, Charlie Chuck saying DTR might end up on injury reserve. Larry saying DTR to practice squad. I can't imagine either of the. I mean, they probably they would want to protect him, keep him on the roster, and he's probably close to being back, wouldn't you think?
Yes, as Brad Stainbrook sort of reported, that the Browns like him, as they should, and they want him on the roster. In terms of timeline, training camp is he's going to be back by training camp. It's a question of if he can get back maybe a little bit before that.
Yeah.
Even at OTAs, like, he's not doing a whole lot, but he is behind like the formation, doing a little bit in terms of like taking sort of mental reps and moving around a little bit to try to do that. He's just not quite there yet in terms of being able to go full go. And as the Browns have with all these guys, they're being very conservative with it. And that's part of the reason Tyler Huntley's here, is because DTR is not ready to go, because they're slow playing Deshaun Watson. And it's a big incentive for Tyler Huntley to be here in the first place. If DTR was ready to go, if Deshaun Watson was ready to go, Tyler Huntley's probably not here because he's not able to get the reps and benefit from the experience. Whereas now, maybe he can make himself a commodity. Maybe he can be somebody the Browns trade. And if not, then he's a good practice squad option because for all the reasons you mentioned, he's played a decent amount of football. He has won games and came, if not for a incredibly ill-advised reaching of the football over the, near the end zone, the Ravens probably win that playoff game with him as opposed to allowing the Bengals to take the ball and run it for the touchdown. It was a ghastly, awful mistake, which is why I hate that play. But like, they were there, ready to win. So like, he fits right in. Like Tyler Huntley fit right in with the type of team the Browns had last year, where he's just, by any means necessary, I'm going to find a way to win. And like, I don't think Tyler Huntley has nearly the promise he did a couple of years ago. And I was like really impressed with what he was able to do with the Ravens, and particularly his connection with Mark Edwards. But I still think he's a pretty good competitor and somebody that, like, certainly not somebody you want to go into a game with quarterback, but at the same time, like, you don't feel like the game is already over before it starts.
Yeah, better than a lot of other options in the league for sure. All right, you're watching The React on the OBR streaming network. That's Pete Smith. I'm Brad Ward. We are reacting to Ken Dorsey Thursday press availability after practice.
Go ahead.
Why do you like using those the choice routes that you have in your system? And I see Elijah over there talking. How do you think he kind of fits in?
Yeah, I think, we continue, again, that's part of us finding out who, if guys feel comfortable doing that, because some guys have that feel, and then other guys, right, it's just not part of their forte. So I think that's the good part is, like, right now, we're getting different guys doing it, whether it's, choice routes, whether it's, deep balls, inside route, whatever those concepts are, to see, who feels comfortable and who's got that knack for running certain things. So Elijah's been coming out, doing a great job, whether it's those types of concepts or just winning one-on-one matchups on a slant or a go ball or whatever. So that's part of that, this feeling out process and evaluation process for us as new coaches, and then for us as we evolve in our offense.
Is there, along the lines with those choice routes, is there a challenge as a coach making sure that the quarterback and the receiver are seeing the same thing and are on the same page? Because it feels like there's a danger of the quarterback would see one thing and the receiver see something different.
And to answer your question, yes. I mean, it takes reps. It takes them talking about it. It takes watching film. There's so many different aspects of, not only those routes, but a lot of different routes within the system. So, to answer your question, there's a lot of communication there. When we had Cole in Buffalo, there was an adjustment period, and getting on the same page. Like, that first year was like, is this gonna work? Because it just takes time for quarterback and receiver to get on the same page on some of those feel routes.
Ken, bigger picture, as you and Kevin have rebuilt the offense and really just put your system into play, how helpful are OTs, even though I know there's no contact, but being able to get reps on film and being able to actually see it play out on the
I mean, anytime you're watching tape or you're walking through and all that stuff, that is great, but to get live reps is huge. And in whatever you're doing, it doesn't matter the system. So yes, I think to be able to get out here, get live reps, to be able to teach off of, guys see it, things are happening fast. I mean, our defense is darn good. So, things happen fast out there for those guys. So there's a teaching aspect of it. And I think the way you worded it was perfect. Like, it's not my system, it's not Kevin's, it's our system. You know what I mean? And so we're developing our system, and these reps right now are invaluable for us.
Okay, go ahead and pause that. I wanted to get all the choice route question, how you say choice routes questions out of the way. So there's a lot with choice routes. One, it's not some exotic concept that these people make it out to be. The Browns have done this any number of ways over the past couple of years. Jarvis Landry was a guy who ran endless amounts of choice routes. But even when the Browns weren't running choice routes, they ran reads. And we look back at last year, and the reason we know the Browns run a lot of read routes is because Cedric Tillman struggled with those read routes and had some very, inopportune moments where he read it wrong. And, that is obviously part where Cedric Tillman's got to get better, having played in a very basic Tennessee offense that didn't ask him to do that type of thing, to now hopefully having gotten better at that aspect and reading and understanding what he's got to be looking at pre and post snap to sort of make those adjustments. And then if he's able to potentially make that next step. So choice routes, we get into this whole thing about, is it difficult to teach and all these other things? The hardest part is the coach doing it is trusting your receivers to do it, because now you're giving them agency, and you are now saying, not only do I trust the quarterback to make the right decision, now I trust the receiver to make the right decision as well on a more frequent basis. And as was mentioned by the reporter, I think Darryl Ryder said it, you do get miscommunications. And that's part of the reason some coaches don't like choice routes, is because they don't want guys, the ball having been turned over and guys coming off the field and one guy saying, I thought I saw, and the other guy is going, I thought I saw. So there's that element to it. And then the other part, which is probably not a very satisfying answer to hear from Ken Dorsey, is the time element, because I think this was mentioned by Jameis Winston in a different presser. I could be wrong, but like, you can't just read everything the same way, because defenders aren't stupid. They're going to start sitting on tendency and going, hey, if they do this, then every time they're going to do this other thing. So there's an extra element of mind games with this, where you've got to sort of be ahead of them, on every aspect. But like, there's an element where should be a very natural transition for certain players, because the Browns already have a lot of trust in some of their players. Like, we look at last year where Amari Cooper's like, calling for plays and the Browns are running them. And like, as I talked about last year, like, it's very easy to yell out, we should run this, we should run this, we should run this, when the coach is going to ignore you anyway. Yeah. But when he actually listens to you, there's a lot of pressure for you now to be right, because you are now saying to the team, we should do this. And if you're wrong, you are now hurting the team, and they don't want to listen to you. So it puts pressure. And with Amari Cooper, he has proven himself to have good judgment on, hey, I can do this and have success. And the Browns have talked about different situations where that really worked, and Kevin Stefanski was sort of like happy to give out the praise of that, and give the credit to Cooper to say, hey, he called this out. So in some ways, this is sort of a natural escalation of that. Additionally, beyond Amari Cooper, like, Elijah Moore is born to do this stuff. The dude just gets open anyway. So, and is endlessly competitive and all these other things. So I think that could be very good for him. Jerry Jeudy certainly could be good for him. For whatever reason, the Browns have name-checked David Bell being good for this, which cool, because like, obviously there are a lot of people who don't like David Bell because he's not a great athlete, which he's not, even though he's the greatest fourth down receiver, arguably, of all time. Don't fact check me. Just go based on last year. Greatest of all time. But like, you do want to give him the ability to sort of be more of a player. And like, when they drafted him, there was this sense of like, he could be a Jarvis Landry type player, because he god-awful athlete by NFL standards, but bigger than Landry was. And if he can be smart and do the right things, which is like the Jacksonville Jaguars play where he scores on fourth down, like, he had the wherewithal to realize it was stupid for me to keep running across the middle because I'm going to get myself covered. So he stops in the hole, gets the ball, runs for the touchdown. Like, if that is a thing that adds an element to his game, great. But Ken Dorsey mentions, like, it's not for everybody. It may not be for Cedric Tillman right now. And ultimately that's still fine. But like, where the Browns want to get to, and David Njoku's talked about this last year, is he wants Deshaun Watson and himself to be like Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce, like, is a human choice route. Like, they don't call a lot for him. He just says, I'm going to go get open, understanding that, like, he has to know where the leverage of the defense is. He has to know where the guys are at on his team, so he's not literally running into them or getting in the way, but like, there are ways he can sort of create problems for that. So when you get good at it, and obviously that's the time part, which is not a great situation for most people, because most people are sitting there going, hey, we need to be good right now for Dallas. That you do need to sort of develop that relationship and get to where it's going to be. And it could be clunky. And there could be situations where you get really frustrated and people are like, screw this, get out of this. Just run the offense, like with predetermined expectations and all this, and maybe some reads. But if it's done well, it can be very good. And I think part of what we're seeing here is that Kevin Stefanski trusts his players and Ken Dorsey trusts his players. And the Browns have been big on empowerment. So this is sort of where that goes. Now, will that work out? We'll see. And the guy I forgot to mention who also should be really good at choice routes is Jamari Thrash.
Yeah.
Some of that at Louisville anyway. He has a good, he based on what I saw, he has pretty good judgment on how to read defenses. So like, that's another area where he can thrive. So like, I think the Browns have the personnel to be successful with this, but ultimately we've got to see it work out and not refer to it as how you say choice routes, because it just sounds, I know it's a buzzword and all this stuff, but like, we get in this weird thing where like we suddenly make it sound like it's a huge deal, and it's just a small tweak that doesn't define the offense. It's just a different way of doing things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's you mentioned, Kelsey and Mahomes, and it's like part of the reason, to your point, that they're so good is they've had so much time together and they literally see everything and process it the same way the majority of the time, which allows them to, manipulate leverages and get himself open, even when there's double teams and whatnot around him. So, the benefits of it are terrific. Could there be some growing pains? Sure. I'm sure there could be. I think that might be the end of this.
I don't think so.
Yep.
Where's Deshaun kind of
Yeah, that's it. All right, so that was Kenneth Dorsey talking about choice routes. Yep, the buzzword there. And we next up, we're going to go to a Pat McAfee video. This is a short one. Mike Vrabel. It's rather entertaining, and I thought it was worthwhile to show tonight. And we'll get into that one right now.
Coach that is now a consultant, advisor, maybe just a tag team partner of the Cleveland Browns. Mike Vrabel is on the field at OTAs. This comes via John Sable, who works at Fox 8 News in Cleveland. And he actually says there, if there was audio, he said, I'm punching that shit out as soon as you get it. Could you imagine having Vrabel just hanging around the team? What a weapon for the Cleveland Browns. This seems genius for Stefanski.
Yeah, it does. I wonder, I'm sure as the season goes too, like Vrabel's role will morph and change, and he's going to, like right now, you see him running the cards for like scout team defense, trying to get the offense. Imagine these O-linemen, like what he's saying to these dudes, like how he's talking to them about how he's going to dominate 1 and 2, put his helmet on and run right through them. Like I bet Brave's going to bring a lot of value to this team this year.
Yeah, let me tell you what he's saying right here. Ready? And sack. That's what he screamed. That's what he just screamed right there in the middle of that particular rep. But I mean, what a weapon this guy's going to be for the Cleveland Browns. I would actually put this as something that would heighten 2 to 3, I think 2 more games, winning games, with having Vrabel just hang around. He's got no real responsibility other than make the team better, right?
Yeah.
That's what we assume with these roles?
Mm-hmm. That's what it feels like, isn't it? I mean, what is this? What do we know what his title might be? I don't even know.
Is it senior consultant?
Yeah.
Okay. It's hey, we're not paying him shit. The Tennessee Titans are, but he's going to be hanging around. I think that's what it's called.
Can you have as many consultants as you want in the NFL? I don't know. I know in college there's all different kinds of rules they have.
Okay, so I think I talked to Shane Steichen about this. I think there is a max that you can have in the entire thing. Now, college, there's different titles that are allowed to be on the field, not allowed to be on the field. Who can they talk to? How can they talk to? How many hours can they talk to? In the NFL, I think there is a max amount of coaches you can have. I don't know about consultants or advisors, though.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say, because would advisor fall under consultant, or are those two separate things? Because then you can kind of double them up.
Yeah, because you can have the assistant to the assistant.
Bingo, yeah.
And that can kind of slip in there. I assume this has been handled, though, because teams have tried to do this too much, and some other billionaire got pissed that his team wasn't doing it, so they had to make a rule. But Vrabel seems like the perfect one, especially an Ohio guy going back to Cleveland. Good for them, dude. Good for the Browns.
Yeah, he grew up not too far from there. So, yeah, I mean, I can imagine. Like, Vrabes will get a ton of cheers if he gets to go on the field for game day. I hope he is on the sideline.
They better intro him.
Yeah,
they should. Last.
Yeah, or
bring him out last.
Lead out, maybe.
Let him wear his high school uniform. His Walsh Jesuit high school uniform. Let him wear that.
And then have him put those glasses on, smash that guitar like he's the Miz, before those Cleveland Browns games, and let all of Ohio go crazy.
All right, funny stuff there. But in all seriousness, when we talked about this, so his title is, I looked it up and double-checked it. So he's coaching and personnel consultant, right? Is, I guess, his official title. That's what I could find. So, and what we heard when he came on board was, yeah, he wants to learn a little bit of the, front office stuff, analytics, backside, of the front office with Andrew Berry, and he'll be a sounding board for Stefanski, and any of the coaching staff. And I think we talked, I don't know if it was me and you that talked about it or me and Casey, but, would he actually be in the locker room interacting with players? We didn't really know, but here he is in OTAs running around out there with the players, interacting with players. I mean, I didn't necessarily expect to see that based on the role that he was given, but it's a good thing, I would say.
Yeah, I didn't think he was going to be on the field. I didn't think he'd have a ton of interaction with players. I thought it would be mostly coaches and sort of specialized assignments. Having said that, given how much he's involved with like special teams and the defense and the offense, I think he's basically just game theory, which is really interesting for a few reasons. One, and the thing that deserved the most attention was he could really help them sort of come up with the answers ahead of time for what defenses were going to do against the offense they're installing. The other element is like, because Vrabel's a defensive guy, there's this element of, hey, just tell us what gives you the most problems, as a defense in general, and like what do you hate defending and that type of stuff, which is super valuable. And there are coaches that will build their offense based off that preface, just finding things the defensive coordinators hate dealing with. And then the defensive part, we heard Jim Schwartz talk about change-ups. The Orioles are doing quite well this year, so we're going to hear a lot about it. That Mike Vrabel, even though Jim Schwartz was an advisor with the Titans when he was dealing with the thyroid stuff, Vrabel did not run Schwartz's defense. He ran a very different style of defense. Now, the defensive line may have been attacking in the way that Vrabel, or the way that Schwartz would be more familiar in helping evaluate the type of players they want. But ultimately, Vrabel ran a very different style of defense. So I'm curious, I'm sure like Schwartz has sort of things he wants to incorporate from his past with the Eagles and some of the other things he's had success. But as he said himself, you're constantly rolling in and out various concepts depending on where the league is going. He estimated about 20% per year. So Vrabel may have some ideas on like what the best changeups are relative to what the Browns defense is doing right now that could give them advantage. But the new kickoff rule, which I know you love, Vrabel's dealing with it the same way as everybody else is, where he doesn't know. So that's sort of where you really get into this game theory thing where, they talked about how it was Kevin Stefanski, Bubba Ventrone, Mike Vrabel, and I think there was a fourth person. I can't remember who, probably Stephen Bravo, the assistant. But like, I expect they're literally getting together in a meeting and going, what do we think this is going to look like? Or draw up what you think this is going to look like? Or how do we sort of, the various ways we can see this play out, which is interesting. So those are all things where you can sort of do that. Obviously, Mike Vrabel also had some things where in terms of game management, the way he thought things out, at times was brilliant in terms of the way he used penalties and the clock and some of the things where he was able to sort of give his team an advantage. The rest of this, it looks like he's at fantasy camp, which more power to him. I mean, he's having fun. I mean, that's that part I think is good for him, as it means he's engaged and wants to be a part of it. And I'm sure the players will respond to that at some point, in some ways, especially some of the guys who play linebacker and some of those other positions, which is where Vrabel's at. So I do think there's a lot of value to that. This is one of those things where people assumed, the owner must have had something to do with this, and that Vrabel's there in case Kevin Stefanski somehow fails. When all I've gotten from this is the Browns are extremely confident in who they are and confident enough to be able to bring in a guy like Vrabel and be like, no, we want your input. We want to know what you think. We want to see what you can offer, and we'll teach you as much as we can in terms of the front office side, because that's obviously a side where Vrabel really was lacking in his time with the Titans, and trying to get more modern in terms of understanding predictive analytics and some of those things with analyzing players and just sort of how teams think in a way that when he eventually, I assume, will get another head coaching job in the NFL, I'd be stunned if he didn't, that he can get together with a GM where he and that person are on the same page, which may be one of the Browns front office people. It would not surprise me if they can, that if Vrabel was to get hired next year to be a head coach, that Glenn Cook or Catherine Raish is then hired as his GM, because it's a real easy, marriage at that point, because you already have sort of a working relationship. You like if you like what that person's doing, what they're doing, what they think and how they operate, then it becomes really easy for you to be like, hey, we'll just take off. And the Browns lose somebody valuable in the front office, but they also get a couple third-round picks, which will make Jack Duffin very happy. And the Browns have also hired Chris Poley in that advisory role, which I know I saw the OBR boards. They hated this move. They're like, what does this guy possibly know? Well, he's been at it for 25 years of doing this, and I get it. Yes, he's like a Nepo baby because of his dad and being a legend, but like, I assume there's some value in having this man in the building. You're not allowing him to make decisions, because I remember people were like super down on the idea that the Browns hired Ryan Grigson at the same time, and like for the same reasons, like, oh, he's not a very good Colts GM, this, that, and the other. And then the Browns were like, no, we thought he was really valuable to this, even though he has since taken a job with the Vikings. Like, you don't have to listen to it in the same way that like I have endless amounts of criticism when it comes to John Dorsey. I think he was one of the worst GMs you could possibly envision in terms of just how he drafted, the way he thought about things, and his use of cap was ridiculous. Like, he was an arsonist in that sense. But for the Lions, I totally understand why you'd want to hire him and have him be an advisor and be like, what do you think of this player? Because at the end of the day, you don't have to listen to him. You can just take advice, take what you like, take what you don't like, and not make the dumbass trades that he was trying to make, or sign stupid money to players that made no sense, like doing damage to the thing the Browns have been building. You don't have to listen to everybody. You don't have to like do exactly what they want, but they may have something that gives you a different perspective, or just challenges your preconceived notions and may give you a better, fully formed idea of how you want to operate. I think that does have value, even if you may not like the person and the job they did. I certainly wouldn't want Chris Poley to be the Browns GM, but in this role, like, great, more power to him, or Mike Vrabel, or having Bill Musgrave as a senior offensive assistant. I really like that hire. I wouldn't necessarily want to be the offensive coordinator, but like, you're not. So get more smart people in the building who can help you, and keep challenging your ways of thinking, keep finding ways to do better, and keep advancing your product and your team to be better.
Yeah, I mean, an idea is an idea, or a concept is a concept, and whether you accept it or not is ultimately up to the people in charge. But the more of them that you have there, I mean, if you're open to that, it can be an asset, right? So
now, the one thing I would say is, I'm fully prepared to be wrong. I assume Mike Vrabel would be in the box on game days.
I would think so too,
because I do think at that point, you want your coaches to coach the guys you've hired to coach. And I think that what he's specifically doing is tailor-made for be in the box, not try to rally. Now, that doesn't change the fact that I desperately want the Browns to come up with a emotional care package for fans who desperately need it, that just has Mike Vrabel on the sideline emoting in a way that's appropriate for fans who want him to be super angry at the officials, or angry and yelling at the sideline, depending on the situation, or cheering in a way that will make people happy. For the people who aren't getting the emotional satisfaction from Kevin Stefanski, just focusing on being a good coach. I think there's value to that. I hope they go that route, but I do think Vrabel's going to be in the box.
Hey, Kevin, he showed a little more emotion last year. It was a little more satisfying. We saw him come out of his shell a little bit, so we'll see.
But he's not yelling at the official. So
you're right about that.
He's coaching his team.
Yes, he's coaching. Yeah, God forbid. But yeah, so very interesting though, the whole Vrabel thing, and it's gotta be helping. I mean, I heard Bubba Ventrone, to your point, on Browns Daily, talking about working with Vrabel on the kickoff. Such a critical play that will happen 8 times a game.
The timing of that move is great. Installing a new offense, dealing with these new rules, year 2 of this defense where you're trying to build on what you did well. Like, I mean, there's no bad time to do this, but I do think the timing works out really well. The Browns are clearly established at this point in where they are as an organization with the coaching staff. I love the timing of this move. I think it has a lot of could pay some serious dividends. Now, will it produce 2 extra wins? I hope they're playoff wins, and I hope I hope that McAfee's right in that, but who knows? Like,
yeah,
I don't know how much grit he can hand out before games, just because he's a giant man.
Yeah. It's the interesting aspect of the defense, real quickly before we get into our next video, is so you had Schwartz take on an assistant or consultant role in Tennessee, Shane Bowen and Vrabel running that defense. Yep. And it was kind of like the narrative around Schwartz at that point was like, okay, yeah, he's got the wide 9 and stuff, but his coverages are like outdated, basically, at that point, right? Like, and that what he learned with Bowen and them was kind of some modern approaches to coverages on the back end, and picked up some stuff and benefited from that while adding his knowledge to that Tennessee defense, which was very good the 1 year. So, there was a really long article in the Ringer about the Schwartz, Bowen, Vrabel dynamic at the time. So now he comes here, and it's almost like you said, perfect timing as Schwartz is talking about, we've got to come up with these secondary pitches, to use the baseball analogy, to take them off the fastball, which he definitely needs to come up with, right? As we saw, as teams are using that aggression against them a lot, the smart teams with the good quarterbacks. And it's on tape now, on film now, as we're going into year 2 under this defense, that Vrabel can bring those answers or help him make those adjustments is ideal. Because from all accounts, if you read that article, he already did that once with them. So,
look, staying engaged in the coaching side is huge. Like, don't get me wrong, it's not like you get lost and you're like, you can't get back. But like, for the people who are like, hey, let's hire Bill Cowher after he's been out of the league for a decade, even though he's sort of covering it, like, it's really difficult to sort of pick up and go with where the league is trending and all those things. Jim Schwartz staying engaged was good for Jim Schwartz. Obviously, his reasoning for not being a coach at that point was his health. Yeah. But it's the same thing for Vrabel. You want to stay engaged, and this allows him to do that, which is going to help him in the long run. As much as the Houston Texans playoff game was incredibly frustrating, like, I support the idea that the Browns got good at a very, mastering their fastball, so to speak. I have no problem with that. If they were throwing 98 over and over and over again and dominating at points, the way they lost is dispiriting. But like, if they can now carry that over and maintain the fastball and then add these other things in, I think they are in a really good position, as opposed to throwing everything. You probably have a lot of mediocre pitches, even though, on some level, the Browns were going to be better purely for the amount of talent they added. But I do think there's definitely merit to saying we're going to master these things, and then we're going to come back and we're going to add these other things to it. We're going to keep being good at what we're good at, and now just come up with enough things to problem solve the things that we gave us problems, and to try to come up with some ability to deal with problems we haven't yet come across.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so this third video here tonight on the React, you're watching on the OBR streaming network. I'm Brad Ward. That's Pete Smith. Tell a friend, hit the like button, hit subscribe. If you're over on X or Twitter watching, hop on over to youtube.com/Orange and Brown Report and subscribe to the channel. This is two pros and a cup of Joe. Brady Quinn, LeVar Arrington, and Jonas Knox talking about the proposed changes to the offseason. Rather interesting topic here, I think, Pete. So we'll dive into this.
Two pros and a cup of Joe here, though. We do have a potential change in the NFL that could be happening here. You guys would be the perfect people to speak on this. Right? You people would be perfect to speak on this. Mm-hmm. As former players who have gone through the grind of the NFL offseason into training camp, Apparently, according to Tom Pelissero of the NFL Network, the NFLPA is working to finalize a proposal to overhaul the offseason starting as soon as 2025. It would eliminate voluntary on-field work in the spring in favor of a longer training camp ramp-up, with players reporting in mid-June to early July, per sources.
Ooh.
Now, seems like a long-ass season to me, but what the hell do I know?
Here's what I would say. As a former player, there's pros and cons to all these sorts of decisions. But if you said the NFL is proposing this, correct?
Yeah, NFLPA.
NFLPA is proposing this, which is interesting because if you're proposing this, right, and you're going to the owners saying, we would like to do this, this is one of your bargaining pieces. When we talk about 18 games, how they're trying to get to 18 games, this is one of the ways. And this is one of the ways where the owners go, oh, okay, well, yeah, well, we'll do that for you guys. Oh, by the way, though, if we're going to do that, you guys have to play an additional game. And we're going to take off one preseason game for you guys. So, it's still going to be in the same time frame, but we're going to play more meaningful games instead of these preseason games.
Does this strike you as a strange request from the NFLPA?
Only in the sense that there are a lot of players that either didn't know about it or don't support it. I mean, look, I think there are arguments on both sides for this. If you're a player, on the one hand, you get what amounts to be a longer time off. Like you get a truer off season. The downside of that is that there are some players who can't function that way. If you give them 4 months off, they may tell themselves, "Oh, don't worry, I won't get too far out of shape. I won't let this, I will take care of myself enough," and then find themselves like struggling, and then they show up to camp whenever it is, and suddenly they're 30 pounds overweight or whatever. And we've seen it even in the current setup. John Harbaugh famously kicked out one of his nose tackles and said he was too fat of camp. So there is an element of there are players who just feel more comfortable with having sort of that regimented process and sort of being able to sort of stay with it, where they're back in the building, in April and start getting to work. And obviously, look, even if they were to make this change, I have to imagine the Browns facility would still be open to players who want to use it for reasons that have to do with the contract. It's going out of style, but there's some teams that do workout bonuses still. That was a big thing for the Patriots when Bill Belichick was there. But additionally, if you get hurt at the facility, you're covered.
Yeah.
If you get hurt away from the facility, you're not. So there's that element. Likewise, part of the reason you would be against this is you have children, and being able to work in over the course of April and May, and even into the early part of June for a mini camp, and then getting 6 weeks off when your kids are then out of school, is very appealing for a lot of players. Shelby Harris didn't specifically say this, but I assume because he's a dad with 3 children, that, for as much as you sacrifice being an NFL player, time away from family and all this stuff, and the amount you work in, and yes, there's the financial reward, even though I still think by and large NFL players are underpaid. That doesn't change the fact that like his kids need a father, and that quality time is super important both to him and to them. So we're not talking about like, he's trying to get out of something. He's just talking about changing where that work comes in. That's good for, that works best for him, so they can maximize his time with his kids. Some players would be happy to have an extended amount of time off, particularly younger players without kids and all this other stuff, because they, again, want that true off season, want that true time off for their body and all this other stuff. So there's just a lot of things that go into this. the NFL ultimately, the league doesn't like this, the proposal as it currently sits, because they want to be a 12-month league. They don't want 2 and 3 months off at a time where it's like a content desert. Whatever you want to say about the NFL, they understand that the draft, the schedule release, OTAs, mini camp, that's all content. That's all reason to stay engaged with their product. And all the various ways they can build up hype and get people excited. It's more difficult to do that. Not that people are going to dislike football, but they disengage and do other things when the NFL's not there. So like giving you 5 weeks, 6 weeks off at most, sort of, there's a small break, but the NFL is like, hey, we'll be right back. And the NFL simultaneously, it wants to widen the calendar. They want an 18th game. They want and an extra bye week. And even if they chop off another preseason game and drop it down to 2, that's still an extra week of season. Yeah. So that's got to go somewhere. So that shrinks it down even more. So that may be a 4 or 5 week break as opposed to a 5 to 6 week break. The NFL wants to be in your home, on your TV, in your mind space all year long. And this proposal goes against that. So there's a lot there with why they'd be against it. I sort of understand the appeal, but to me, I still feel like this proposal is dead on arrival. Like, I just don't know why they didn't get more groundswell of support from players before trying to go with this. It sounds like there were way too many players that were sort of like, this, I'm just not interested in it. They haven't even gotten to the owners and the league yet. And the players are like, we don't want to do this. Or enough of them are doing it where you sort of have cut off yourself at the knees already in terms of negotiation. And like, this is not an effective way to negotiate to get, to give up that 18th game. You're just changing the calendar. That's not anything.
No.
You want real concessions, whether it's more money, more protections, more, agency in certain things like player discipline, whatever. Like the NFLPA is like the weakest union because careers are so short. Like they can't really go on strike because if your average career is like 3 years, you've given up 2/3 of it or a third of it already. Like that's unrealistic. Like, there are players that the high priced quarterbacks and the superstars can sit there and chill out for a year, but they're already winning anyway. They don't need it. Where it's the 45 to 53rd guy in the roster that desperately needs to play right now. They can't afford that stuff. So ultimately they have very little bargaining position, very little leverage. And so they end up like ankle biting and getting terrible concessions, which is where, to me, but again, like I think JC Treader was much better at shooting for things that made sense for players that like were helpful, and he got a lot done. We'll see what happens with I think it's Reeves Maben is in charge. But like to me, this ain't it, and I don't think it's going to go anywhere.
Yeah, it just struck me as a strange request because you're going from like voluntary and a weekend, basically a mini camp, to now starting your season like 6 weeks earlier. And I get maybe, health-wise, maybe that matters, but it seems like the wrong hill to die on when you actually have a chip to play with this 18th game, right? Like, this seems like the wrong thing to, I don't know. I'm not a player, but it's an interesting thing. And to your point, you could see why some players would be against it, right?
I can also see why coaches would hate it because coaches certainly don't want to not see their guys for months at a time. I mean, like Kevin Stefanski is, has flat out admitted, he called himself mother hen in that regard. He wants everybody there because it gives you that peace of mind. That's every coach. That is every coach on the planet. They want you there. They don't want these guys disappearing for months at a time. And it's not necessarily they don't trust them. There are players they shouldn't trust, but it's more along the lines of they don't trust everybody else. And things can happen.
For sure. And to your point, the NFL kind of has it timed up perfectly right now as it is. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
with putting this out there and using this as a potential negotiation or bargaining chip, is, as we talked about before, this just shouldn't be something that you should be as focused on if you are if you're a current player, thinking about it for future players, former players. Like, this is just not something that's that important outside of the people that are currently playing in the NFL. Now, but that's the reason why I feel like they're doing this, is because they're creating more space to adjust, move back, adapt the schedule however they need to for a potential of 18 games. And look, back when we played VAR, like, I don't know how you viewed the 6 weeks we got off after OTAs and minicamp that are going on right now. I didn't like it because I felt like you were off, but you kind of weren't. Like, you could have a little bit of fun, but basically after July 4th, like, you were in full training camp mode, even though you weren't in training camp yet. Yeah. Like, maybe you didn't report, but your ass was working out every day. You were throwing every day. You were doing everything you could every day to prepare yourself to be ready to, like, kick it into gear as soon as you got into training camp.
Yeah.
And so this allows them to basically take OTAs and minicamp like they have now, and the offseason phase 1 training where they work out and meet with the coaches. It basically allows them to shift that into June, July, and then they build into training camp. So it's going to feel like one really, really long season for the players. It'll be an adjustment. But that being said, it probably makes the most sense. So you don't have guys who go to OTAs minicamp, take those 6 weeks off, and don't do jack squat. They just sit around. They don't come back. They don't come back in shape and ready to go. So it probably makes sense from that standpoint.
As a player, I kind of look at it and I'm like, that's too damn long. As a player, in my mind, I'm like, that's long. Like, June, you check in June. But I think there's this – I think we have to look at it from a mental fixation, a classic conditioning type of approach. Why is it that we look at the length of a season and it's like, oh no, can't do that. That's just way too long. It's like, as athletes, it's like, this is our season. This is the amount of time our season is. This is what we do, and we're in and we're out. It goes to the next season. But it's your job. Like, you're like, in reality, you're actually doing, who knows what your real weeks are in college. I mean, people may not really take the time to really take a step back and think about how monopolized your time is in college. My time was way more monopolized around the calendar year in college than it was in the pros. Now, if you're saying they're going into training camp in June, and if it's not a ramp up, to a training camp, if you're going into a training camp, which, by the way, I hear training camps are no different than OTAs and mini camps at this point anyway. So if it's just a matter of time where you're coming into the facility, you're getting your treatment, you're getting your conditioning, you're meeting with your coaches, you're doing organized things on the football field without the rules saying you can only do so much or you can't do it during this time. If it's set up that way where you can go home, then that may be I think that has some attractiveness to it, because you are able to get into a groove, and it's not so, especially if you're going to do away with, because I'm saying, look, to get to 18 games, if you do away with 1 or 2 preseason games and you have one preseason game where the guys get an opportunity to get their feet wet, game 2 you go through a dress rehearsal and then you get into it, where you're trying to figure out, okay, these few positions we have left available, these guys are going to get these games 1 majority of, and then some of, or maybe the majority of game 2 as well, maybe the majority of both for the guys that are on the bubble to make the roster. I think that makes a lot of sense. I really do. I don't have a problem with it. I just don't. I think we're so conditioned to think that our season starts here and it should end there. And once you go outside of them parameters, I think it's a cause for complaining. It's a cause for concern. Obviously, the first thing you think about is injury.
Well, and the other thing,
it's interesting to hear LeVar Arrington talk about that, about the condition, the conditioned thought of, this is how long our season is and this and that and the other. and they're conceding that there's going to be this 18-game season, right, at some point, and it's probably going to go to 2 preseason games, likely 2 bye weeks, right? So you're going to have to add a whole week on to the whole thing anyways. So let me ask you this. Do you feel like adding the 18 games, and they're going to do it because of money or whatever, right? No matter what. The almighty dollar is what kind of rules the NFL's decision-making most of the time. But does it devalue the season, the games in the season? Like, do you look at it like, because you're by adding games, you went to game 17, you went to game 18, you're making each game mean a little bit less. Do you look at it that way?
Yes. I mean, you look at how Bill Belichick sort of used the season. Like, the first 4 weeks for him were preseason. Of the regular season, he used them as preseason, sort of figure things out. I think the further along we're going, you're seeing more teams think in those terms, that at least a couple of those ramp-up games are, obviously you want to win, but they are preseason in some ways, that you are trying to figure out who you are by week 5, week 6, week 7. But like, even with the 17 games and 7 potential playoff teams, we're still seeing a whole bunch of garbage football games at the end of the year. They have no meaning. I mean, the Browns-Bengals glorified exhibition, the Steelers and the Ravens glorified exhibition. Like, you're going to have more of those. Like, on some level, like, we haven't seen too many breakaway teams where they can take off multiple weeks, but that will happen. We will get there. We could talk about parity, this, that, and the other, but so much of that right now is just the disparity in the conferences. The AFC is just so stacked that it's more competitive, and yet you still have this going on where the Browns were completely locked into the 5th seed. They had no benefit to play. And there was this sense of, all right, let's just get through this. And they had, time to prepare. They came off a Thursday night game. They had the half week or a week and a half mini bye, and then another week to get rested before the playoffs. Like, I think to me, I thought 16 was the right number. I didn't like the 17th game, but you're right. It's going to happen, but you're going to see more crappy football. Like, you're going to see more games that you just don't care about. And, whether it's the Thursday night product, which can often be underwhelming, and some of the things you're happening, there may be teams that are like, look, man, we're going to throw guys out there and see what happens. But, as soon as this starts getting ugly, we're getting out. And, we may have to see them expand the active roster from 46 to include all the guys to allow for that possibility.
Yeah.
Because at some point it becomes like problematic to sort of be unable to do this. I mean, the NFL is going to be playing a dangerous game where they start to become like the NBA, and you get load management, and you get games where like teams like, the 4th and 5 nights. I know they've reduced the amount of that, but there's some amount of stretch where they're just like, nope.
Yeah.
And they're going to sit their guys, and fans are going to be pissed because they paid good money for those tickets, and you get into that whole conversation. The NFL is going to find out exactly where that point is, and the only way from their standpoint is to keep pushing this. So we'll see, but obviously there's going to be a tipping point. May not be 18 games, maybe 20, but we're quickly approaching a point where you're just going to see some garbage football and just move on for that week or turn to another game. And part of this is the NFL's sort of betting that even if you turn off the game you were watching, you're going to watch another game. Like, that's the other part of this, where as long as they have a good game on that everybody's going to tune into, they're square.
Yeah. It's interesting. And like you said, and I said before, it's coming whether we want it to or not. It's just, to your point, like, I wonder if 18 will be that number, or like if it's further, but they are going to push it all the way until they get to that point where it dilutes the game enough that it's noticeable, right? And things like that start to happen where like, hey, I'm just gonna sit my starting quarterback on Thursday Night Football this week because this week doesn't matter that much, because you're at a point right now where at 17 still every single game means a whole hell of a lot, right? And that's the benefit to the NFL versus these other sports.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole appeal with the NFL. That's the whole appeal with college football. That every game matters, and that's always what they're trying to sell you and keep you engaged. Now, college has already sort of lost a little bit of that. Now, still, college football's great and crushing it, but like there is an element of losing that specialness and losing that feeling like every game matters. That you obviously don't want to lose, because that is what's sort of really driving your product. In addition to the fact that, look, there's certain things that the NFL has gotten very right, which is being so predictable. You know when the game's going to be on before the season starts. You're like, you sort of programmed your mind that Sunday I'm going to be watching football or whatever. Those are certain advantages that every game feels like an event, but don't lose that, because at that point, then you do run into a real problem. Now, that problem is probably decades away. At least that's the NFL's belief, but they're going to push it.
Yeah. Interesting topic there. All right. We're going to finish up the night with the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show with their Watson evaluation. Some thoughts from the panel here on the post first day of throwing in front of the media of Watson, and some other thoughts on Watson's game here. So enjoy.
Bonus bet on a 4-part same-game parlay from the Guardians win Watson a second ago. But yesterday at OTAs, the media got its first chance to see Deshaun Watson truly throw in person since the shoulder surgery he had to go under after getting hurt against Baltimore. And, G, I want to start with you. It seemed that Deshaun was letting it rip, throwing it 30, 40 yards, according to different reports on multiple occasions.
Was it 40 yards?
I saw between 30 and 40, depending on which you read.
Okay, I heard 30.
Okay,
It was between 30. I mean, it depends on where you're counting, where he threw from and whatnot. But
yeah,
he was seemingly throwing without pain, G, and a couple of throws looked pretty good. So how encouraging was it for you to see Deshaun Watson be able to kind of uncork it, let it rip this early in training camp without any seemingly restrictions, I guess, for lack of a better
Man, that's where you're supposed to be at. Listen, I didn't change my whole tune. Look, I'm with
5,000.
I'm with Deshaun. I said I need the 5,000, whether he delivers the 5 or not. You know what I'm saying? We're gonna have to see what that looked like. But here's my thing. I see Elijah Moore's back at camp. Good job, Elijah.
Yeah, I wonder what led to that, by the way.
Hey, people be watching the show kind of.
We went in on a Monday.
Yeah, and we wasn't trying to be all the way. We just said, hey, look.
No, yeah, that's right, Jay. He showed up because you called him out. Seriously.
Well, can we talk real quick about Elijah Moore? The fact he's going to dominate practices and training camp again. Like, it's going to happen. I'm telling you right now.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to do what they did last year and be like, Elijah Moore's crushing it. It's just how he plays. He is built for that environment. And he just gets open. Like, he's really good at that stuff. It's on the Browns to sort – and obviously he's got to make some of his own improvements, but it's on the Browns to utilize him better, more effectively than they did last year. But he's going to crush it. Like, this is part of the reason I was not worried about him being there, is because I know what his training camp's going to look like. Everybody's going to have glowing praise about Elijah Moore all offseason long. And then then we're going to get to the season. We're going to be like, we'll see. Because last year, obviously, the talk was he was going to be a big time player as the third option behind Cooper and Njoku. And he had a career year in terms of yardage. I think he's over criticized in some ways, but I also think the Browns did him no favors. And obviously there were some drops and some injuries, but like, I think I'm very bullish on what Elijah Moore is going to bring to this team this year as potentially like the fourth option. That is a nightmare because he just gets open. And if Deshaun Watson's playing well and Elijah Moore is able to pick on like the fourth corner or whatever it is, like he could get some big plays doing that. Like, I feel good about his ability and what he can offer.
Yeah, I mean, we know we've talked on here before about how hard he's working. So it was ridiculous to kind of call him out about the OTAs.
I suspect, and I could be wrong, that he hates the NFLPA proposal because he cannot survive that long without football.
Yeah. I mean, it's like a Kobe Bryant mentality towards football with Elijah. And, I'm a big fan of him. Like I agree with you. I think when you go back and you watch parts of last season, you kind of forget some of the bigger catches that he had in moments because sometimes he was outshined by Cooper and stuff. But he made some really big plays at times and big catches in key moments. And I just think that he can be tremendous if used properly. I mean, they wasted so much time with your theory with the
Jim Schwartz pumping the team up by jet sweeps because he didn't defend them at all. To your point, like he crushed the Rams game, and unfortunately Flacco was not great at points in that game, and they got overwhelmed. But like he was great in that game. He was crushing the Jets game, then gets hurt. Like I said, I again, so much of this is Watson's just got to stay on the field. If he stays on the field, not only do I think he will play very well this season, but I do think players like Elijah Moore are going to have a good year. Now, what that means in terms of numbers, I don't know. But I think the difference could be you're going to feel better about what Elijah Moore is doing for your football team.
I would sure like to see him earn an extension here. I would like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just an interesting dynamic. I mean, no one wants to see it happen, but let's say Amari Cooper gets hurt this year, and and Elijah Moore has a great year. Elijah Moore, along with Jerry Jeudy, and build your receiving core off that. But yeah, whatever happens with Elijah Moore, I root for him. Obviously, it'd be better if he stays with the Browns from my standpoint, but I want him to be successful. Period. Just because I want to see him play well, whether it's here or somewhere else.
Agreed. All right, let's continue here.
If you're at the crib, your people should say, "Hey, that little vacation, we're gonna finish that out. We'll come back and get that together later on." But I'm gonna tell you what, Deshaun Watson, to me, I think he's gonna be ready to go. And he told me, and I'm gonna take his word for it, right? When he said, "Oh, I expect to play well this year," that's good. I'm not gonna sugarcoat that. I'm expecting to play well. And I like that mindset. I don't want to hear I got some rust, or we need to hit this track running. We look at that schedule. That schedule that we got, that denotes that Deshaun Watson has to be doing this right now. Because if he wasn't doing this by now, this ain't one of those years where you could just come limping out the gates. You got to be ready to go. But I'm also with Bull on this one. That's cool. It's practice. I like to see it. I would much rather you be out there that you throwing the ball and it looks good than not be out there. But you know what it is, Bull. Come on now.
The only thing I care about is that he's able to do it.
Yeah, you have
right. That's it. That's all that matters. What it looks like. Yeah. The details of it. He's healthy enough to throw deep balls. Yep. That's it. How much zip there is? He's not wearing equipment. They're not wearing equipment. There's no pressure. There's no nothing. I only care that he's healthy enough to be on the field and making those throws.
Just like Joe Burrow, right?
That's it. That's all I want.
Oh, cool. That's all we need to know.
That's all I want. You want the guys healthy enough to do what they have to do. We can't. I say this all the time about OTAs and mini camps. Coaches and players can learn things about each other or whatever. We don't learn from the outside. We don't learn anything about OTA. Just that a guy could be there. That's it.
Yeah.
We don't really learn anything. Is he going to be better this year? We can't tell that by watching him in practice. But it's definitely a major positive that he's out there.
Well, we have all heard the biggest part of ability is availability.
That's right.
And I couldn't agree more with both of you guys. It's May 31st. So we have all June, all July, all of August before he'll throw a meaningful pass.
That's right.
The fact that he looks like an NFL quarterback again is exactly where we need him to be. Now, you said that's where he's supposed to be. The interesting thing about this is, and we might end up cutting him slack the first month of the season, and here's why, guys. This is unprecedented, what he's coming back from for an NFL quarterback. This is a baseball pitcher's injury.
Right.
So the exact injury that he had, the folks that I've talked to have dug and dug and dug and dug, and they can't find one.
So strange that it's never happened before.
It is strange, but when I heard that, I go, there has to be a case.
Yeah.
No, there really isn't. This is not an injury that you see that's a common injury for NFL quarterbacks. So the fact that he's out there slinging.
Is that true? Like, there's nobody in the history of football that's ever had this injury before? That seems far-fetched.
I am not sure which injury he's referring to.
Right.
If he's talking about the glenoid
fracture,
then I have no idea. If he's talking about the injury to his shoulder earlier in the year, that has definitely happened. Sam Darnold had that injury. So I assume he's talking about the glenoid. In general, when it comes to bones, I don't really worry all that much. I think collarbone is a weird one. That one you can sort of like fracture and fracture and fracture, but like for the most part, bones are bones. They heal up and recover well. I'm far more worried about things like, ligaments, tendons, and then muscle stuff is typically not as big of a deal. But we're not talking about the mechanism in his arm and how it works. We're talking about a bone sort of needing to be repaired and just basically put back because it was not where it was supposed to be, and sort of that's why it was doing that sort of clicking thing. Again, I'm not a doctor, but just in general, or I should say, I'm not a doctor or surgeon, and even if I were, I wouldn't be familiar with his case. But in general, I just don't get too worried about stuff with bones. I'm way more worried about the ACLs, like in general. He's had 2 of them.
Right.
But like, if you're just asking me who am I more worried about, Deshaun Watson or Joe Burrow coming off this latest injury, it's Burrow. Like, I'm way more worried about his wrist, which the Bengals sort of weren't necessarily super upfront about the fact he's basically on the same throwing schedule as Deshaun Watson. They sort of like, the media showed up on a day that like Zach Taylor wasn't necessarily prepared for. It was just like, I thought you guys were coming yesterday, but he sort of has an off day. So like, it was like this revelation for the Bengals. They're like, oh, maybe he's not quite as healthy as we thought he was. But I have more concern about that. Like, even his doctor is more concerned about that than what's going on with Watson. Now, maybe the surgeon who did this is concerned and just isn't saying it publicly. I don't know, but like, we can say unprecedented, this, that, and the other. He seems to be healthy, feeling good. I feel like on some level the Browns would want to get out in front of a lingering concern over the shoulder, but who knows? I mean, they did not do the greatest job last year with sort of disseminating that information. So who knows? But like, if nothing else, I would hope they learn from that experience and be like, yeah, this is something we're at least cognizant of. But look, they've been very disciplined in their rehab program in terms of building up the strength. He looks leaner. Some of those things that like people are saying he noticeably looks a little bit bigger than he did last year, which seems like it's all positive. So I don't get caught up in that. I for the most part, everything they're saying other than this is reasonable, sort of where I'm at, where he's on schedule, he's doing. I'd rather have him throwing than not throwing.
Sure.
But ultimately, none of this really matters until it's he's playing the Cowboys and they're winning football games.
Yeah.
Football, and it looks like an NFL quarterback is, I think, very optimistic. But I'm not gonna. And I tried to judge the zip on the ball. I had an NFL quarterback tell me once that he was playing with a sore shoulder, and he told me, "Do you understand the difference between my full fastball and what I'm working with now, which is about 3 to 4 miles an hour slower?" He said all those out completions are pick sixes, all of them.
Yeah,
that's how precise this game is.
Right.
You can't get by with 90 to 95%, especially on that out. When you're making that throw to the flats, and you could have a corner that's sitting on that route, if it's a tick slow getting to the receiver, it's going the other way.
That's right. And I'll just speak for myself. I can't tell the difference.
I can't
just
either.
Watching it, at practice. I mean, how can you tell the difference?
I wonder if anybody has put a jugs gun on his throws.
Yeah. I would think,
not a
right?
jugs gun, a jugs machine is
Yeah,
an actual radar gun.
Right. Yeah.
I'd be curious to know.
What I would like to see is I would be curious to get context. Like sometimes if you got 2 or 3 quarterbacks and they do the drill at the same time, you can see, okay, well, Jameis Winston and Huntley are throwing the ball. What does it look like?
Their ball's getting to the target quicker than
I would like to see that. But the crazy thing is, all of this stuff we're waiting to see, I don't think we're going to see it to the first game.
No, he's not going to play in the preseason.
He's not going to play.
Why would you? You wouldn't risk it. No,
not one snap in the preseason.
And I think we've seen a shift in philosophy in the league the last couple of years. The first 3 games now feel like the preseason. But when you have 17 games instead of 16, it doesn't sound like a huge difference, but it does give you a little bit more of a safety net early on to figure things out. And teams, we're a couple years into the 17 games, and teams really haven't adjusted the way they're using their players or not using their players in the preseason. So I'd be stunned if we saw him more than a half. I do think that they would want to get him out there for at least a half.
See, I don't know. I don't think he's going to. I'm with G. I don't think he's going to play at all. I don't think he's going to play at all.
I want to see him for at least a half.
Another thing, not
one
only
game.
Not only the 17 games, Jay, but obviously whenever they changed this a couple of years ago, I don't remember the exact year, but now the 7 playoff teams.
Sure.
So not only is there more games, but there's more opportunity to get into
more
the
room
season.
for error.
Right.
So they're using those early games more. But with the thing with the Browns, you can't slip you can't slip up those first couple games.
Not this division.
That is and look at the first quarter of their schedule.
Yeah. Well,
it's going to be fun.
We haven't talked about this, which I can't believe we.
All right, before, where do you come down on preseason?
Let me touch on the zip thing. So, one, I don't care, but 2, even if I do care, it does sort of allow him to work on some throws that maybe he doesn't necessarily work on. Like you see him there, and he's sort of throwing the comfortable frozen rope type throws, which has value. Like if he can sort of use this time to work on touch throws, great. Like I don't have a problem with that. I don't need him to throw as hard as he can right now because that's typically how he operates, or throw the deep ball or whatever. Work on the intermediate stuff. Work on those type of throws that you just sort of need to be able to comfortably make and feel good about, and then build up to those other things. So that's that part. I'm not worried about that stuff. But preseason, I hate it. I hate starters in preseason. I absolutely despise doing it. I was not one of the people who wanted Kevin Stefanski fired when Denzel Ward got hurt, but I understand the sentiment because it's the risk is so much more than the risk. The risk outweighs the reward to me. So I would not. I would just use my depth guys and guys you want to see get work. And other than special teams, because like you get so few opportunities to do those live that you sort of have to do it like that. Yeah. Even though Ventrone sort of hinted at the idea that they're probably not going to do anything beyond the joint practices because they don't want to show anything, which I get, at least on the kickoff part. The most impactful rule in NFL history. But like punt and all that other stuff, you want to get those guys out there and doing that stuff. But in general, I want to see the Isaiah McGuires of the world. I want to see DTR. I want to see Jameis Winston. I want to see Zach Zinter. I want to see potentially DeJuan Jones, depending on where he is in his rehab. I know he's out there and doing stuff, but that may be a player where you sort of want to see him do a little more. I tend to doubt it, but like, you know, they've got a Luke Whippler. They've got, if Javion Cohen is still on the team at that point, I want to see what he can do. Lorenzo, is it Thompson or whatever, the left tackle out of Rhode Island. I want to see those guys play because I'm going to see the other guys play in games that matter. I may not get to see those other guys play. And they've got a lot of talented young players that you want to sort of look at. Like Alex Wright, who, you know, we're all hoping takes another step forward. He could absolutely dominate in the preseason, which I would enjoy. Mike Hall, obviously, would be a player you get a lot of reps with. Do some of the things they did with like DeJuan Jones, where they made him play a whole game for the sake of his wind and all that. But the part where I disagree with Jay is there are still teams that have a very different approach with preseason. And I still agree with him on his premise that like the early part of the season sort of functions as an extension of the preseason. But like the Pittsburgh Steelers go balls to the wall in preseason. They like play their starters. They have that is the style they want to play. That is who they are, and that is who they believe. They believe in that. I think there are ways you can do that in practice, that you can amp up the physicality without necessarily taking guys to the ground, or it's in a controlled enough environment where you're not having guys, basically flying missile at each other to deliver hits. Whereas in the preseason, guys are free to do that, and there's a little bit higher risk. I think you can do some things to simulate it, amp up your practices, amp up some physical periods without necessarily having to go all the way into the preseason. But we'll see if Kevin Stefanski agrees. Maybe he will look at the Denzel Ward situation and go, I'm never doing that again. That would be my hope. But we'll see, because there is, as we talked about last week, the Browns are making a point to go to Seattle. And that is longer than any road trip on the regular season. And the Browns were 3-5, 3-6 if you count playoffs on the road last year. I have to read that as the Browns are trying to make a point with that. So maybe they do want to play a half. Maybe they do want to play at least a quarter. I will sit there and, basically be doing this, looking through my fingers, hoping nobody gets hurt. But at the same time, sitting there going, maybe Deshaun will look good. But that's the thing. We overanalyze that to death. Again, just like people have been doing with these training camp things, where if Deshaun Watson makes 10 throws in preseason, everybody will look through them endlessly to try to evaluate where he's at, to try to come up with some hot take about what it means. And we don't know. So again, I'm not a big fan of it. I would rather you just do it in practice. If for no other reason, it allows you to really do what your offense is going to do, as opposed to giving these sort of vanilla looks and some of those basic stuff. And I understand that there's a benefit to going through the pregame routine and ramping up and getting accustomed to those things. But you could do that in the Brown Stadium if you really wanted to, as a practice, and open it up to the public if you wanted to do that, whatever. But I think there's ways to do it that you don't have to go that route. I think teams are creative enough that they can figure out ways to do it, but we'll see. The Steelers have their way. I think the Browns would go this way. And then, I'll say all this, and somebody will go, the Steelers go super hard and all this other stuff. And then all it takes is one guy to go down for the season, and you absolutely sit there and go, oh my God, what did we do? And then you get people who are crushing the head coach, is what happened with Denzel Ward when he suffered the concussion. It's risk outweighs the reward for me.
And there's like a thin line, right? Like, to your point, like a guy like Alex Wright, like somebody that's gonna contribute, but you still want to see it gives them some time to kind of get better in the preseason and get into a rhythm. Or like your fourth and fifth wide receiver, I would assume that we would probably see a lot of Tillman, Thrash,
yes,
guys,
Doesn't that sound good to you? These are the things I actually want to see. Now, there are plenty of people like, oh, screw it, I don't want to see these. I want to see Cooper and Njoku and all these other things. I want to see Trayton Welch out there doing whatever he's going to do. I want to get evaluation of those guys. There's they've added so many of these young players on defense. I want to see Ronnie Hickman. This is a guy who had that great stretch of football at the end of the year. And granted, some of those quarterbacks were backups and not great competition, and then he didn't look as good in the playoffs. But he has a big opportunity to be a major component on this team. I want to see, some of the undrafted free agent guys they signed in the secondary. I want to see Miles Harden play. I want to see Dyshawn Gale play. I want to see Khalif Halasi get out there and compete. I have a good sense of where the Browns are going to be with their starters. You may not be this notion that you're unprepared going to week one. I don't really buy, given the amount of football you're playing. Right. Maybe there's a slight benefit, but ultimately, I'm more interested in seeing these other guys, because unlike in many years past, the Browns have talent. They have guys where I'm interested to see. And it's just a numbers game. You can't rest everybody. That's the other part of this. So guys have to play, but there's a lot of opportunities, jobs to be won, and just guys you want to see out there. Jamari Thrash, Cedric Tillman, and
Cam
those
Mitchell.
guys are guys I want to see. I want to see those guys play. I want to see those guys develop. I want to see what they look like. David Bell, I want to get, I want to be sort of get a hint of things to come. Or if the Browns do suffer injuries, can these guys come in and contribute?
Yeah, absolutely. To your point, it actually makes the preseason more fun because there are a number of talented guys that aren't going to probably see a lot of playing time unless they end up with a rash of injuries like last year. So it's enjoyable to actually see them out there. Like, to your point, Miles Harden, I look very much forward to seeing play. So, yeah. Good stuff tonight, Pete. This has been another edition of the React on the OBR streaming network. Keep it locked to hear the rest of the week. We've got 7 p.m. tomorrow night with OBR Weekly, Barry McBride and the legend Fred Greetham. I'll be back on Thursday night with All Eyes on Cleveland at 7 p.m. Great job tonight, Pete. Any parting words for our listeners and viewers?
Just stay strong as we go on with just 2 kickers. And look, we're getting not that far off from minicamp. Like, stuff's starting to ramp up. We're almost there.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for participating in the show tonight.
Subscribe to the now up and running YouTube. Help us out.
Yes. Subscribe, like, the algorithm enjoys it. It helps us out. Get locked in. Ready for the, as we get you ready, wall-to-wall coverage at the OBR for the 24 Cleveland Browns. For Pete Smith, my name is Brad Ward. Everybody else at the OBR, have a wonderful evening. We are out.